All right, we'll get started. Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing today? I hope you're having a great morning. Thanks for joining me here today. I'm Faraz Aladdin, part of Illumio product team, and I wanted to share with you how Illumio's adaptive security platform can help you secure your applications and data. Many of them Microsoft applications and services, and we'll talk about how you can get GPO-like functionality and better, not only for your Microsoft applications, but actually other applications as well. So with that, let's get started. For those of you who may not know Illumio, we are a leader in microsegmentation, and our solution provides deep application visibility and microsegmentation. And we keep some pretty good company. Here's a partial list of some of our customers. They probably have some of the largest microsegmentation deployment on this planet. And they have chosen Illumio, and they have put their trust in Illumio to do business with us and select our technology for keeping their applications safe. So how does all of this thing happen with Illumio's platform? When we get into that, the first thing that comes into play is, isn't this something that my security team, my firewall guys, and the people in the network infrastructure team has solved this problem? Yes and no. So let me just take a little step back and walk you through what is the problem statement here. The challenge over here is, if you look at a typical enterprise data center, you have your perimeter firewall, which most enterprises have accepted the fact that you will probably get breached at some point. And you have to be ready should that breach happen, because once that breach happens, you have a very large attack surface that an unauthorized user can skate through and get onto high-value assets. Well, so to get around that problem, most enterprises in the past traditionally have used some sort of segmentation. But those segmentation mechanisms, although not new, have been very cumbersome, not the easiest to work with. In many cases, they involved re-architecting the network and the plumbing and the subnetting, et cetera. And you as a systems person or as an application owner, or even as a security professional, were not necessarily seeing the effectiveness of these solutions, besides it being very operationally complex. And in fact, one of the key challenges with this is that even if you do have some of these mechanisms that are allowing you to do segmentation in your data center, you miss a lot of traffic. In fact, by some estimates, about 80% of the traffic today in your data center is east-west. And beyond a certain point, firewalls have no idea, no knowledge of these flows or these traffic patterns that are occurring. So they really cannot solve this problem for you, because what you can't see, you can't protect. So that is a challenge with the way traditionally enterprises have tried to solve this problem. Something else that is happening in your environment. Most enterprises don't look like this picture on the left-hand side, where everything is nicely contained in your on-prem data center. Enterprises are more than ever and very quickly adopting a hybrid multi-cloud strategy for a variety of reasons: cost reasons, effectiveness, speed of deployment of applications, et cetera. And what you're seeing is that your environment is starting to look more and more on the right-hand side, where you have your workloads and applications residing in whatever form factor they may be most suitable with: bare metal, virtual machines, container nodes. And they are residing not only in your on-prem data centers, but also in public clouds. In fact, multiple public clouds in many cases, because you are using those clouds for specific reasons or purposes or geographical considerations, et cetera. So therein lies some of the key challenges. Number one is, obviously, as I mentioned, all of your workloads, applications, they are everywhere and on anything, any kind of instantiation, bare metal, virtual machine, any location, hosted, public cloud, private cloud, et cetera. Number two, most organizations, they're interested not in the network and the plumbing, but deploying applications and services as quickly as you can. And while that has empowered many of the teams in your organizations, it has also posed a challenge, because now you have different groups potentially using their credit card, if need be, spinning up workloads and trying to get the applications out as fast as you can. Now, what happens to security in that kind of an environment? It kind of becomes an afterthought, and therein lies another challenge. You want your security to move at the speed of your business, which is you want to deploy applications and services as quickly, but you want security to travel with it, not be an afterthought. And last but not the least, you have increased your attack surface tremendously, because you're now not contained within a self-contained on-prem data center. You have a presence in multiple places. So now you have a very large attack surface that you need to protect. And clearly, the mechanisms that people have used traditionally, whether it be using VLANs on switches or access lists on routers or opening firewall ports, have not been as effective. So what's the answer? Illumio actually has looked at this as a very specific problem to be solved, and from ground up, from the time the company came into existence, has focused on solving this problem. So how does Illumio solve this problem? So let me give you a very quick view of the architecture, and hopefully that will help you. By the way, all of the things that I'm going to talk about today and show you, you can see all of this thing live. We are conducting live demonstrations in our booth every half hour. It's right by the meal halls over there. Bright orange sign, can't miss it. So please do stop by, and you're going to see all of these things in action. So coming back to the architecture, there are two big pieces of the architecture for Illumio. The adaptive security platform. Number one is, if you look on the left-hand side over here, it's the virtual enforcement node. This is a very lightweight agent that sits on every workload that you want to protect. Two things to remember. These workloads could be any type, bare metal servers, virtual machines, container nodes, doesn't matter to us. And they could reside anywhere, whether in your on-prem data center, in public clouds, or as hosted environments. So that's number one. Number two, this agent is very lightweight, and it actually does not crack any packets or put packets out of the kernel, introduce any latency or performance challenges. It actually leverages the mechanisms you already have, all the enforcement capability that you already have. And hold on to that thought for a second. You might be thinking, wait a minute, I haven't bought any firewalls, I haven't bought anything yet. What is this mechanism that I already have in place? We'll talk about that. Those are the firewalls built into the OS. This lightweight agent actually is of the order of less than 10 meg in footprint, very little, if any, CPU usage, less than 1%. So traditionally, people, when they think agent, they think of introducing latency, performance issues, cracking packets, taking it out of the kernel. None of this thing happens. So what exactly is this virtual enforcement node doing? Two things. Number one, it transmits information about the workload, the context and rich telemetry about what IP addresses is it talking to, on what port numbers, and who's talking to this workload, on what port numbers, what processes. This intimate knowledge is sent to the central brain, which is the policy compute engine, which is the second part of our architecture. The policy compute engine, it's got two functions. Number one is to actually develop a high-fidelity application dependency map. We refer to that as illumination. Again, remember, what you can't see, you can't protect. So the number one thesis in our philosophy is to be able to view all of your applications and see how they are talking to each other. And I'll show you how this happens. The second thing it does is it takes your input in natural language policy, meaning all you have to do is say, my CRM application should talk to point-of-sale application. And being a whitelist model, that will be the only path that will be allowed. Everything else is blocked. Similarly, you can say, I want my web tier to be able to talk to my processing layer to talk to the database, and databases talking to each other for replication. You don't need to go to a firewall university and learn all the firewall rules, and don't have to touch IP addresses or port numbers. You give your intent in natural language policy, and the compute engine calculates optimal policies, precise layer 3, layer 4 rules, and passes it back down to these VENs. These VENs take that information and program the OS firewall that you already have. In the case of Windows, it's a Windows filtering platform. In the case of Linux, it's IP tables. And those mechanisms exist for AIX, Solaris. In fact, Illumio has taken a step to even allow you to do enforcements via F5 load balancers, Cisco switches, and very soon public security work groups, security groups as well. So you already have had all the enforcement you need with you. You just never had a way of leveraging them, activating them, and orchestrating them at scale. Illumio has solved that problem for you. So the agent really does not crack packets to enforce. It actually leverages that rule set that you already have in the firewall. Now, the one thing that always comes into mind is that what happens if a hacker gets in and turns off this VEN or this particular agent? It's very tamper-proof. So if somebody comes in, wipes off the rule sets that this agent has written, after seeing that those rules have gone, it will repopulate those rules. If the hacker is smarter and says, well, somebody's putting in these rules, I'm going to just take this agent out, kill the process. After 3 missing heartbeats, policy compute engine knows that it has gone. It will raise an alarm and quarantine that particular workload. So even though you might have gotten onto an asset, you're not going anywhere else. And your entire environment is safe. So this agent is very tamper-proof. So between the agent and the policy compute engine, we give you the ability to see all of your applications, how they communicate with each other, and then develop very precise and optimal security policies in natural language. Something else we have done, and this is, again, you can see this all of in action in our demonstration, is we have done some integration with vulnerability management systems. Yesterday was Patch Tuesday. You probably read information about the vulnerabilities that might exist. How many of you went ahead and did all of the patching that you had to do? Probably not as much, because sometimes you have a situation where you can't patch because either the patch is not available, or you're in a production freeze, or you might just need a priority of what to patch first. We can actually take that information, overlay that on top of the application dependency map, so now you're able to see which of my applications are vulnerable, how vulnerable they are, and if I don't have the ability to patch, how can I use microsegmentation as a compensating control to make my environment safer and reduce my risk. So again, this is a very good view of the architecture in terms of how Illumio makes it happen. So as I mentioned, the first thing, our fundamental belief is seeing is believing. What you can't see, you can't control, and that's why the application dependency map or illumination is the key. It takes away your blind spots. Think of it as actually doing an MRI on your estate, entire compute estate. So you get to see all the things that are hidden in there. Once you have this intimate knowledge of how applications are communicating, not the network, the applications, you are going to be able to create policies that are effective and reflect the posture, the right security posture you want for your organization. And last but not the least, that actually is also a tool. If you have applications that are under compliance, under regulatory compliance, you're not only going to be able to meet it, but use it in the time of audit to show how you're segmenting off your environment, whether it be a Swift banking application, it could be PCI, retail environment. You can actually not only segment it, but meet the requirements of the audit as well. So here's an example of the live application dependency map that you will be creating. So once you put the agent in, it starts communicating with the policy compute engine. Within a few minutes to an hour, depending on the number of workloads you have in the application flows, you're going to start to see this rich view, which shows you how your application tiers are communicating amongst themselves, as well as applications across with each other. And this is going to be a starting point to develop policies. So using those policies, we give you a very flexible mechanism to segment your environment as much as you want. Your segmentation, breaking up that attack surface into smaller logical chunks. Those chunks could be at the application level, meaning you take an application, ring fence it, put a bubble around it, and say, I am going to allow this application to talk to this. Within this, all the tiers can talk however much they want. Or you can actually get more fine-grained, and you can say, I want to actually say that the tiers within my application have a specific way they talk to each other between the web and the processing in the database layer. Or you can get even granular and say, I want a specific process in this tier to talk only on this port protocol. Again, you don't need to know all those port protocols. You specify the intent in the natural language, and Policy Compute Engine will calculate all the optimal and precise policies. So here's just an example of, from top right, people use this as a coarse-grained segmentation for separating geographical environments or environmental separation from dev, from production to test, or it could even be based on zones, business units, etc. But then you can get into the application-based segmentation, segmenting specific applications or the tiers, as I mentioned, or the processes. Or actually, you can even bring in the user context. We do integration with Active Directory, so we have intimate knowledge of all the user groups that are in Active Directory. So if you had a scenario where somebody in the organization was part of HR, they moved to another organization, well, they should not be having access to HR applications now. Now that they've changed the membership, the rule set will say that this web application is accessible, say, only by sales group. So anybody who's not part of sales should not be able to access it. If this person moved from HR into sales, they will have access to sales application, but even if they had credentials to that HR application from before, they can't use it because it's not reflected in the rule set. So again, all of these things, you'll be able to see it live in action. Please come by our booth number 120, as I mentioned before, and we are conducting demonstrations every half hour. So here's an example of some of the rules. So what all you do is you select the level of segmentation as granular as you want, and it will create all the rule sets. At the bottom, if you see all these port numbers, TCP protocol, etc., you can tie all of this. All you are saying is, I want my web layer, which is doing my processing application, to be able to talk to this. Or if you get more granular, you can say, I want within this application bubble the different tiers to behave in a certain way. The web can talk to web, the processing can talk to web, and the databases are only allowed to talk to each other. That's all you specify. All the rule calculation is done by the policy compute engine. You can even take it down one more notch to specific processes, as I mentioned. And when you hover over in our system, it actually tells you what specific processes and what protocols and what port numbers it's allowing it on. So again, all the heavy lifting is done by the policy compute engine, and you're able to, with a few clicks and in a few minutes, segment your application and make it more secure. Now, this is great. We actually have done even better in the case of Microsoft-specific applications and services. I'll get to that. And before I leave this thing, this is just a quick summary of how our customers use this Illumio platform and to solve the problems. Many of our customers, they actually start off over here, mapping their application dependencies. Remember, illumination, the map that we give you and create, that is your starting point. Many a times, it is only about making sure that I have intimate knowledge, so when I migrate to the cloud, I have all the information. Similarly, you can ring-fence applications, or if you are moving securely, you want to move your assets from your on-prem to your cloud environment, or it could be based on environmental separation, as we talked about, or the specific processes at an application tier, and even bringing in the user segmentation. So let's turn a little bit to the Microsoft-specific applications and services. What we have done is we have actually worked very closely with Microsoft, taken their best practices, their recommendations, and rolled it up into specific segmentation templates. And we have segmentation templates for many of these Microsoft applications and core services. All you have to do is, with one click, install this template, and it does all the heavy lifting. It takes all of the recommendations and best practices that Microsoft has given you. As an example, in the case of Active Directory, this specific high port range, 15,000 ports that need to be opened up when you install an Active Directory and bring up the domain controller. Try calling your firewall guy and say, open up this 15,000 ports for me. Not a very good conversation. With the template, you don't need to worry about that. In fact, we give you better than GPO functionality. Imagine trying to do this with GPO. You need a lot of intimate knowledge in terms of port protocols, the specific services, and the processes running behind it. We have boiled down all those 15,000 ports into 15 specific rules, policies, that actually tie, in the case of this particular example, you will only be allowed if you have this specific service and process running on that port and that port number, with using that protocol. If you are a malware trying to masquerade that and trying to come into that particular port range, you won't be allowed. So extremely secure. With one click, you can secure your application and your environment. The Microsoft-specific ones. Here's another example of the Exchange template. Again, similar scenario. All the recommendations and best practices that Microsoft has in place. And in fact, Microsoft clearly states that host-based firewall mechanisms are the best way to protect your applications and environment. We have made it extremely easy for you to do so, created these templates which you can install with one click, and you will see all of this in action. You please come to our booth. We'll show you all of the power of the platform and how with a few clicks you can make your environment even secure. And not only that, we give you this same functionality for your other non-Microsoft applications as well. So you actually get better than GPO type functionality in terms of security, and for your non-Microsoft applications as well, and across environments, whether it be Windows, Linux, other systems, and anywhere you have your compute footprint. So hopefully this gives you an idea and enough to start thinking about how you can relate this in your environment and how Illumio can help you secure your environment. So once again, thank you very much for being here. Please do come by our booth. We are giving away some real cool t-shirts. So please come by, get your badges scanned, enjoy the demonstrations, and if you have any questions, get hold of anybody in orange t-shirts you see in our booth. Thanks again.